Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of the newspaper analysis from the UPSC perspective. Today we have taken up important articles from the Hindu newspaper. Topics for today's discussion are displayed on your screen. Let's begin the discussion.
So now before moving on to the discussion, let's see weekly answer writing practice question. Question says new foreign trade policy of 2023 has brought new avenues of export promotion. So analyze the policy and state how the challenges faced by the external sector could be resolved by it. And you have to write answer within 250 words. And submit your answers on the ELEARN portal in order to get it evaluated by our evaluation experts. Also, details of this topic have been provided on the Compass website of RAU'S IAS dated 3rd April 2023. So let's begin our discussion. Now, our discussion is based on this article, which appeared on page number 1 in the Hindu newspaper. Context of this article is that Prime Minister Narendra Modi recently told that India and Australia will not tolerate any elements that may harbor plans to harm strong bilateral ties. He announced that India will open a new consulate in Brisbane, and also both sides have decided to focus on upgrading economic cooperation and trade agreement to the level of a comprehensive economic cooperation agreement. Now this article talks about India and Australia relationship, which is quite important because bilateral, regional and global groupings and agreements involving India and affecting India's interest is important theme under GS paper 2. Also, UPSC has been asking question based on the same theme. This question based on India and US came in year 2019. So let's begin our discussion. Now, evolution of India's Australia international relations can be traced through various stages, characterized by shift in priorities, engagement, and the deepening of bilateral ties. Here is a concise overview of the evolution of the India-Australia international relations. It started with limited engagement. In the early years, India and Australia had limited bilateral interaction. Then, both countries shared membership in the Commonwealth of Nations, which provided a basis for some cooperation. Then, India and Australia established diplomatic relations in the pre-independence period with the establishment of India Trade Office in Sydney in year 1941. See, to understand the basis of the relationship, you should know that there are several common traits. And what are those common traits? It includes secular, multicultural democracies, a free press, and an independent judicial system. And most importantly, English language serve as the foundation for closer cooperation and multifaceted interaction between the two countries. Then next came Cold War era. See, during the Cold War, India pursued non-aligned foreign policy while Australia aligned closely with Western nations, including United States. So there was an alignment with different blocs. And this is the reason why bilateral relations between India and Australia remain subdued with occasional exchanges and cooperation, mainly within multilateral frameworks. Then India's economic liberation in 1990s opened up opportunities for increased trade and investment, including with Australia. So what happened? Indian diaspora in Australia expanded, contributing to stronger people-to-people ties. Then after economic liberalization, India and Australia began to recognize the potential for closer collaboration and initiated efforts to strengthen bilateral ties. And how it can be done? Both countries engaged in defense dialogues, naval exercises, particularly Indo-Pacific region. Then bilateral trade and investment increased significantly with a focus on sectors like mining, education, information technology, etc. Then later, in year 2009, India and Australia elevated their relationship to a strategic partnership, reflecting the growing depth of engagement. And what's the difference between the both? Here you can see that there is a enhanced defense cooperation. That means two countries conducted joint military exercises, signed defense agreements, and expanded defense technology cooperation. You can see increased diplomatic interactions, more focus on Indo-Pacific region. The next 2020 marked the upgrade of the relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership, and this signifies the breadth and depth of engagement across various sectors. So now let's see multifaceted and deepening collaboration between India and Australia that spans various sectors. So we'll start with strategic relationship. In year 2009, India and Australia established a strategic relationship. This we have already discussed. And this includes joint declaration on security cooperation. Then this cooperation has been further elevated to comprehensive strategic partnership in year 2020. Australian Foreign Policy Blueprint, released in 2017, sees India in the front rank of Australia's international partnerships. And in order to pursue comprehensive strategic partnership, foreign and defense ministers of both countries agreed to meet in a 2+2 format biennially. Now further, let's look into defense cooperation. During PM Modi's visit to Australia in year 2014, both sides decided to extend defense cooperation to cover research, development and industry engagement. Engagement concerning mutual logistics support (MLSA) and implementing arrangement concerning cooperation in defense, science and technology. And these were concluded during the virtual summit held in June 2020. Also, India and Australia conduct their bilateral naval exercise, that is RAU'S Index, since 2015. Then later in year 2018, Indian Air Force participated for the first time in the exercise Pitch Black in Australia. And in October-November 2020, Australian Navy participated in Malabar exercise. Here, when we are discussing about strategic and defense ties, one factor is also there, that is China factor. Why? Because China is common challenge for India and Australia. India and Australia have been assessing the Chinese challenge since year 2013, as India has been facing an aggressive Chinese military along the border. Also, ties between Australia and China were strained after Canberra in 2018 banned Chinese telecom firm Huawei from the 5G network. So now moving on to the another aspect, that is economic and trade relationship. As a part of its efforts to develop strong economic relationship with India, the Australian government commissioned Indian Economic Strategy to 2035 in year 2018. This was done to define a path for Australia to unlock opportunities offered by Indian economic growth. You should know that total bilateral trade is expected to cross $45 to $50 billion in 5 years from $5 billion at present, after the free trade deal comes into force. Currently, we are having $5 billion and we are expecting that it will rise up to $45 to $50 once free trade deal comes into force. Also, India was the 8th largest trade partner of Australia, with trade in goods and services representing 3% share of the total Australian trade in financial year 2019 and 20. In year 2022, India and Australia signed an Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement, that is ECTA, which came into force in December 2022. And this agreement resulted in an immediate reduction of duty to zero on 96% of Indian exports to Australia and zero duty on 85% of Australians' exports to India. So this ECTA aims to double the bilateral trade to $50 billion in 5 years and ease movement of people, goods and services across border. So this agreement is quite important. Then next, India is one of the top source of skilled immigrants to Australia. As per 2021 census, around 9.76 lakh people in Australia reported their ancestry as Indian origin, making them the second largest group of overseas born residents in Australia. Also, mechanism for mutual recognition of educational qualifications was signed in March 2022, and this facilitate mobility of students between India and Australia. You should remember that this will catalyst the cooperation between both the countries in the field of education. The next aspect is civil nuclear cooperation. Civil nuclear cooperation agreement between the two countries was signed in September 2014 during the visit of then PM Tony Abbott to India. And this agreement provides the framework for substantial new trade and energy between India and Australia. The next is initiatives related to clean energy. The countries signed a letter of intent on new and renewable energy in February 2022, which provides for cooperation towards bringing down the cost of renewable energy technologies, especially ultra low cost solar and clean hydrogen. Now, during the virtual summit in year 2022, India announced matching funds of 10 million for Pacific Island countries under Infrastructure for Resilient Island States, and the same amount for Pacific Island countries under International Solar Alliance. Now, let's see a few examples of multilateral cooperation. Now, you know that both India and Australia are members of Quad, Commonwealth, Indian Ocean Rim Association, that is IORA, then Asian Regional Forum, then Asia Pacific Partnership on Climate and Clean Development, and have participated in East Asia summits. Then, both countries have also been cooperating as members of 5 interested parties in the World Trade Organizational context. And you should know that Australia is an important player in Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation and supports India's membership of the organization. So here is a pre-fact that currently India is not a member of Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation. So now with this you can see that India and Australia Comprehensive Strategic Partnership reflects the commitment to deepening engagement and cooperation in multiple areas, contributing to the strengthening of bilateral ties and regional stability. But still, there are few challenges in the relationship. So let's discuss those challenges. So here, the first challenge is dichotomous Australian foreign policy. Why? Because there is some misalignment in Australians' economic and political interests. Though Australia has been actively engaging with India and US as a part of Quad grouping, its economy still depends on China, owing to its huge share in bilateral trade and investment. Second is withdrawal from RCEP. Now, what is RCEP? It is a regional comprehensive economic partnership agreement that complements and builds upon Australia's existing free trade agreements with 14 other Indo-Pacific countries. So one reason for India's withdrawal from RCEP was objection from farmers' organizations and dairy cooperatives due to fears of flooding of cheaper agricultural and dairy products from Australia. Third challenge is differences in approaches towards Indo-Pacific. For India, the entire Indian Ocean takes precedence, whereas for Australia, it is Southwest Indian Ocean, that is its immediate north and vast stretches of the South Pacific. So there's a difference in approaches towards Indo-Pacific. So these are the important challenges in the relationship between India and Australia. So what can be the way forward to overcome such challenges? The first one is international forum. Both countries, India and Australia, need to cooperate actively in international forums like Quad, East Asia and International Ocean Rim Association, etc. Then next is technological cooperation. There is a need to improve technological cooperation between the countries. So that's all about India and Australia. So our next discussion is based on this article, which appeared on page number 14 in the Hindu newspaper. Context of this article is that, as per the predictions of the Japanese firm Nomura, foreign direct investment, that is FDI, flows into India, which fell 25.6% in year 2022 to 23 to $28.7 billion, are likely to remain seeded this year as well and may only rebound from 2024 to 25 onwards. Now, if you will trace the relevance of the topic from the perspective of UPSC examination, one will find that GS3 syllabus mentions issues related to growth, development and employment in the Indian economy. So this theme is quite important. So in this discussion, we'll look into basic concepts of FDI. Then we'll see what is the difference between FDI and FPI. Then we'll talk about significance of FDI. Then government initiatives related to it. And we'll end our discussion with challenges and way forward. So let's begin our discussion. So first of all, we must understand the basics related to foreign direct investment. So foreign direct investment, often abbreviated as FDI, is defined as an investment made by an individual or an organization in one country into a business located in another. That means that individual is from country A, but he is investing in a business located in country B. Apart from money, FDI brings with it knowledge, technology, skills and employment. So it not only brings capital but also knowledge, technology, skills and employment. Also, FDI is a major source of non-debt financial. That means those receipts that are considered as no liability to the government. So there is no responsibility of the repayment. For example, proceeds from sale of PSEs, that is public enterprises. So these resources are used for economic development. Then Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade under Ministry of Commerce and Industry makes policy pronouncement on FDI, which are notified by Department of Economic Affairs under Ministry of Finance. Then let's see where they can be invested. So investment through capital instruments by a person resident outside India. The first in this is in an unlisted Indian company. Then in 10% or more of the post-issue paid up equity capital in a listed company. So here capital instruments are like shares, convertible debentures, global depository receipts, foreign currency convertible bonds, etc. So these all are capital instruments. Next is that FDI can be invested through government route or automatic route. Now what is government route? Application in foreign investment facilitation portal of concerned administrative ministry or department. So here proposals of more than 5,000 crores is to be approved by Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs. And now what is automatic route? Here no prior approval of the government or RBI is required. Next, let's see prohibited sectors. The first in this category is lottery business, then gambling, chit funds, then trading in transferable development rights, then real estate business or construction of farmhouse, then manufacturing of cigars, and then activities or sectors do not open to private sector investments are atomic energy and railway operations. So these facts are important from the prelims perspective. Now let's see different types of FDI. The first is greenfield FDI. Greenfield means new or net investment. For example, it is an investment in new plants. That means establishing new production capacity by an investor or company. For example, PepsiCo and Hyundai, because they not only invested capital in Indian market, but they also bought knowledge, technology, skills and employment along with them. Second type is brownfield FDI. Under this, investor investing in an existing plant, and it is mainly done through merger and acquisitions. For example, Tata acquired Jaguar Land Rovers in UK. Another example is Vodafone acquired stakes in Hutchison SR. So these are the two types of FDI. Now let's see some important facts and figures. As per the OECD, United States is the top destination for FDI inflows, followed by China and Brazil. Then Australia and India is at 6th position. According to this, India received its highest ever FDI inflows of around $80 billion in 2020 to 21. Then top FDI sources for India in year 2020 to 21. In this, Singapore, USA, Mauritius, Netherlands and Switzerland emerges at top 5 countries for FDI equity inflows into India. Now, which sectors attracting highest FDI? That is computer software and hardware, and then infrastructure. Then which states attracting highest FDIs inflows? Gujarat, Maharashtra, Karnataka. So all these facts are important from prelims examination. In recent years, India has become an attractive destination for FDI because of favorable government policies. India has developed various schemes and policies that have helped boost India's FDI. These schemes have prompted India's FDI investment, especially in upcoming sectors such as defense, real estate, research and development, etc. Some of the major government initiatives are as follows. The first in this is the government of India increased FDI in the defense sector by increasing it to 74 through the automatic route and 100% through the government route. Then second is government has amended rules of the Foreign Exchange Management Act, allowing up to 20% FDI in insurance company LIC through automatic route. Then FDI limit in telecom sector under the automatic route has been enhanced to 100%. Earlier, FDI up to 49% was allowed under automatic route. Now it is 100%. Then 100% FDI in coal mining and coal processing plants, such as coal washery. Earlier, FDI in coal mining was allowed only for captive consumption. Now, allowed to sell coal in open market. Then implementation of measures such as PM Gati Shakti, single window clearance, GIS map land bank are expected to push FDI inflows in 2022. In August 2021, government amended Foreign Exchange Management, that is Non-Debt Instruments Rule 2019. And under this, it allows 74% increase in FDI limit in the insurance sector. So now let us quickly look into the another instrument of investment, that is FPI, and how it is different from FDI. Now FPI is foreign portfolio investment. It is equity investment not exceeding 10% of the total paid up capital of the company. And this is also known as hot money. Why? Because this is short term and unstable. And here, short term represents inflows such as investment in shares, bonds, debentures, etc. So now let's see difference between foreign direct investment and foreign portfolio investment. First criteria is percentage of ownership. Here it's more than 10%. And here, as we have already discussed, not exceeding 10% of the total paid up capital of the company. Next difference is that along with capital, it will bring technology, management skills, employment, etc. This we have already discussed in PepsiCo example. But here, there is only transfer of capital. Then what it leads to? Ownership and management. Here, only ownership. Then where does it flow? Physical assets, and here it's financial assets. Which segment of market targeted here? Primary, and here it's mainly secondary market, but they can participate in primary market as well. FDI is considered as stable and long-term investment, whereas FPI is considered as unstable and short-term investment. That is why it is also known as hot money. Then another criteria is flexibility. Here entry and exit is quite difficult, but here entry and exit is easy. That is why it is unstable and short-term. Here role of investor is quite active, whereas here it is quite passive. So these are the important differences between FDI and FPI. Now let's see what is the significance of FDI for countries like India. First in this is that it will boost employment. A better FDI flow will increase job opportunities in the country, and that is one of the main reasons why developing countries like India wants to attract the more significant numbers of FDI. Another important significance is increment in exports. Foreign enterprises have an extensive worldwide marketing network and marketing data that aids in promoting domestic products around the world. As a result, FDI encourages export oriented initiatives that boost the country's export performance. Then, advancement in various fields. For the development, a country needs advanced technology and people skilled enough to use it properly. FDI bridged this gap by bringing the advanced and the latest technology in the country and teaching the skills to the people to use it efficiently. The next is competitive market. By encouraging international organizations to enter the domestic market, FDI helps create a dynamic environment and break down domestic monopolies. A stable business climate allows companies to develop their products and process regularly, which fosters creativity. Consumers now have a more comprehensive range of things to choose from at more reasonable cost. So these are the important significance of FDI. Now let's see few challenges. The first in this is threat to domestic industries, especially when they fail to compete with their large MNC counterparts. So we should provide enabling environment to the domestic industries so that they can compete with the larger MNCs. The next is vulnerability due to foreign elements like digital crime, as was the case with the Hawaii case in USA, especially when there is inflow of unchecked FDI. So for this, robust screening and review mechanism should be in place to contain such incidences. The next is restrictive FDI regime. FDI regime in India is still quite restrictive. Foreign ownership of between 51 to 100% of equity still requires a long procedure of government approval. These rules should be amended in favor of automatic approval for 100% foreign ownership, except on a small list of sectors that may continue to require government authorization. The next is high tariff rates by international standards. India's tariff rates are still among highest in the world and continue to block India's attractiveness as an export platform for labor intensive manufacturing production. So, what is needed? Much greater openness is required, which, among other things, would include further reductions of tariffs rates to average. Next is no liberalization in the exit. See, while the reforms implemented so far have helped remove the entry barriers, the liberalization of exit barriers has yet to take place. In our view, there is a major deterrent to large volume of FDI to India. An exit policy needs to be formulated such that firms can enter and exit freely from the market. That's all about FDI. Now, last discussion is based on this article which appeared on page number 10 in the Hindu newspaper. Context of this article is that the Supreme Court has held that the independence of judiciary is a part of basic structure of constitution, and judicial independence from the executive and the legislature requires the judiciary to have a say in the matter of finances. So now, if you look at the syllabus, evolution of Indian Constitution, features, amendments, significant provisions and basic structure is important theme under GS paper 2. Also, in year 2019, UPSC has asked question based on basic structure of the constitution. So, in order to understand the basic structure concept, we'll have to move sequentially from understanding the amendment procedure, then genesis of the doctrine through various Supreme Court judgments. Then we'll see the current ambit of the term, and we'll end our discussion with merits and demerits of the basic structure. So let's begin our discussion. So now, to understand what is the procedure for amendment, you should know what is constitutional amendment. Now, like any other written constitution, the Constitution of India also provides for its amendment in order to adjust itself to the changing conditions and needs. However, the procedure laid down for its amendment is neither easy as in Britain nor difficult as in USA. In other words, Indian constitution is neither flexible nor rigid, but a synthesis of both. According to Article 368 in Part 20 of the Constitution deals with the powers of Parliament to amend the Constitution and its procedure. It states that Parliament may, in exercise of its constituent power, amend by way of addition, variation, repeal any provision of the Constitution in accordance with the procedure laid down for the purpose. However, the Parliament cannot amend those provisions which form the basic structure of the Constitution. This was ruled by the Supreme Court in Keshav Nanda Bharti case 1973. So with this you can make it that Parliament cannot amend those provisions which form the basic structure of the Constitution. And this was ruled by Supreme Court in Keshav Nanda Bharti case. So this case is quite important. So now let's see procedure for amendment as laid down in Article 368. So an amendment of the Constitution can be initiated only by the introduction of a bill for the purpose in either House of Parliament and not in state legislatures. Then the bill can be introduced either by minister or private member and does not require prior permission of the President to introduce bill in the Parliament. Then the bill must be passed in each house by a special majority. Now what is special majority? A majority of the total membership of the house and a majority of 2/3 of the members of the house present and voting. Then each house must pass the bill separately, and in case of disagreement between the two houses, there is no provision for holding a joint sitting of the two houses for the purpose of deliberation and passage of the bill. So the important point is that bill must be passed in each house by a special majority, and in case of disagreement there is no joint sitting. Then if bill seeks to amend the federal provisions of the Constitution, it must also be ratified by the legislatures of half of the state by a simple majority. And what is simple majority? It is majority of the members present and voting. So now after duly passed by both the houses of the Parliament and ratified by the state legislature, where necessary, the bill is presented to the President for assent. Now the President must give his assent to the bill. That means he can neither withhold his assent to the bill nor return the bill for reconsideration of the Parliament. So here, President must give his assent to the bill. Then after the President's assent, the bill becomes an act, that is Constitutional Amendment Act, and the Constitution stands amended in accordance with the terms of the Act. So this is all about the procedure for constitutional amendment. Now let's see emergence of the basic structure. Now to start with this, the question whether fundamental rights can be amended by the Parliament under Article 368 came for consideration of the Supreme Court within a year of the Constitution coming into force. How? Because in Shankari Prasad case 1951, the constitutional validity of the First Amendment Act 1951, which curtailed the right to property, was challenged. Here, Supreme Court ruled that the power of the Parliament to amend the Constitution under Article 368 also includes the power to amend fundamental rights. So the word law in Article 13 includes only ordinary law and not the Constitutional Amendment Acts. Therefore, Parliament can abridge or take away any of the fundamental rights by enacting a Constitutional Amendment Act, and such a law will not be void under Article 13 because it includes only ordinary laws and not the Constitutional Amendment Acts. So here, Parliament can amend fundamental rights, but in Golaknath case 1967, Supreme Court reverts its earlier stand. In that case, the constitutional validity of 17th Amendment Act 1964, which inserted certain state acts in the 9th schedule, was challenged. Here, Supreme Court ruled that fundamental rights are given a transcendental and immutable position, and hence Parliament cannot abridge or take away any of these rights. So here Parliament can abridge or take away any of the fundamental rights, but in this case Parliament cannot abridge or take away any of these rights. Also, Constitutional Amendment Act is also a law within the meaning of Article 13 and hence would be void for violating any of the fundamental rights. Now what happened? Parliament reacted to the Supreme Court's judgment in Golaknath case by enacting 24th Amendment Act 1971. This act amended Article 13 and Article 368. However, in the Keshav Nanda Bharti case 1973, Supreme Court overrules its judgment in Golaknath case 1967. Here, it upheld the validity of the 24th Amendment Act 1971 and stated that Parliament is empowered to abridge or take away any of the fundamental rights. At the same time, it laid down a new doctrine of basic structure of the Constitution. It ruled that the constituent power of the Parliament under Article 368 does not enable it to alter the basic structure of the Constitution. Now, what does it mean? It means that Parliament cannot abridge or take away fundamental rights that forms a part of the basic structure of the Constitution. So here, Parliament can abridge or take away any of the fundamental rights by enacting a Constitutional Amendment Act. Then in Golaknath case, Parliament cannot abridge or take away any of these rights. That means fundamental rights. Then in Keshav Nanda Bharti case, Parliament is empowered to abridge or take away any of the fundamental rights. But at the same time, Supreme Court laid down a new doctrine, that is basic structure. So now, Parliament cannot alter the basic structure of the Constitution. That means Parliament cannot abridge or take away fundamental rights that forms a part of the basic structure of the Constitution. Now, the doctrine of the Constitution was reaffirmed and applied by the Supreme Court in the Indira Nehru Gandhi case 1975. In this case, Supreme Court invalidated 39th Amendment Act, which kept the election disputes involving Prime Minister and the Speaker of Lok Sabha outside the jurisdiction of all courts. The court said that this provision was beyond the amending power of the Parliament as it affected the basic structure of the Constitution. So again, Parliament reacted to this judicially innovated doctrine of basic structure by enacting 42nd Amendment Act 1976. This act amended Article 368 and declared that there is no limitation on the constituent power of Parliament and no amendment can be questioned in any court on any ground, including that of the contravention of any of the fundamental rights. So now with 42nd Amendment, there is no limitation on the constituent power of the Parliament, as no amendment can be questioned in any court on any ground, including that of the contravention of any of the fundamental rights. However, Supreme Court in Minerva Mill case 1980 invalidated this provision as it excluded judicial review, which is a basic feature of the Constitution. So applying the doctrine of basic structure with respect to Article 368, court held that since the Constitution had conferred a limited amending power on the Parliament, Parliament cannot, under the exercise of that limited power, enlarge that very power into an absolute power. Indeed, a limited amending power is one of the basic features of the Constitution, and therefore the limitations on that power cannot be destroyed. So what does it mean? That Parliament cannot under Article 368 expand its amending power so as to acquire for itself the right to repeal or abrogate the Constitution or to destroy its basic features. So here in Minerva Mill case, Supreme Court invalidated this position. Now, having seen the emergence of basic structure, let's see the elements of basic structure. So now, in crux, the present position is that Parliament under Article 368 can amend any part of the Constitution, including the fundamental rights, but without affecting the basic structure of the Constitution. However, the Supreme Court is yet to define or clarify as what constitutes the basic structure of the Constitution. From the various judgments, the following have emerged as basic features of the Constitution or elements of the basic structure of the Constitution. For example, supremacy of the Constitution, judicial review, independence of judiciary, etc. So now, having seen the elements of basic structure, let's discuss few important criticism of the doctrine of basic structure. And the first in this category is legitimacy of the judgment. Why this is a criticism? Because legitimacy of the judgment can be questioned as the verdict was given on a very thin margin. That means 7 was in favor of this, while 6 gave dissent note. So the arguments of legitimacy of basic structure doctrine hangs on a very thin margin. Then another criticism is it is against the doctrine of separation of power. How? As judiciary is overlooking the letters of the Constitution. That means whatever is written in the Constitution. And what they are doing, they are inventing its soul, which is quite subjective in nature and can vary as per the interpretations. So its metaphysical approach, basic structure disturbs the separation of power and establishes judicial sovereignty. Then judiciary is least representative and mostly elitist, least accountable, hence assuming the role of super legislature, which is unsuitable for democracy. Then last is entire spectrum of basic structure is undefined. So it creates uncertainty and discretion which affects the working of the executive. So these are important criticism of the doctrine of basic structure. Now let's see few important arguments in favor of the doctrine of basic structure. See, the fundamental structure concept serves as evidence for the constitutionalist thesis that majority rule by force cannot destroy the core of the Constitution of India. So, Parliament too is a creature of the Constitution. Therefore, it can only have such powers that are expressly vested on it. Then another argument in favor is that it serves as check on constituent power, the fundamental concept preserved Indian democracy. Otherwise, unchecked parliamentary power may have turned India into totalitarian state. Then, retaining the fundamental principles of our constitution, which our founding fathers so painstakingly crafted, and it's beneficial. Also, it gave citizens fundamental rights that no state organ can alter by restricting the legislative branch's ability to amend laws. And also, basic structure, being dynamic in nature, is more progressive and open to changes in time, unlike the rigid nature of earlier judgments. So after having seen the amendment procedure, then genesis of the doctrine through various Supreme Court judgments, then what its current ambit of the term, and we have seen the merits and demerits of the basic structure. So overall, doctrine of basic structure is a crucial part of the Indian Constitution, protecting its core values and principles. While it has its advantages, such as preserving constitutional democracy, it also has its drawbacks, such as creating a power imbalance between the judiciary and the legislature. Ultimately, the doctrine is essential in maintaining the integrity and stability of the Constitution, and its significance cannot be overstated. That's all for today. Stay tuned for more such updates.